Johnny Harris is one of the most popular new media journalists in the world. He has over 6 million subscribers here on YouTube, and I don't need to spend too long introducing this man because if you found this tiny little channel, you almost certainly know who he is. His beautifully animated videos attract tens of millions of viewers every single month. But with great influence comes great power, which is why we have to talk about his most recent reporting on Saudi Arabia and its ambitious NEOM project.
I've never seen so many trucks in my entire life. Oh, and these roads, a lot of them are brand new. A lot of them don't even show up on Google Maps.
Been driving along it all morning. I can't really fathom what I'm seeing.
Oil transformed this desert kingdom into a modern, powerful country. Enter NEOM.
But what's clear is that this kingdom isn't stopping anytime soon.
Now I want you to imagine that you're reading from two different articles in two different newspapers. Now really consider which one gives you a better impression of this fictitious leader. The first one reads, "Our amazing President Bob has personally saved the economy with his fierce intellect and determination. Bureaucratic goons tried to say it couldn't be done, and they tried to slow him down, but he proved them all wrong." The second one reads, "President Bob's methods may be controversial, and critics have highlighted their concerns, but there's no denying that these unorthodox measures have improved the economy." Which one was better at convincing you that President Bob was actually an effective leader? Probably the second one, right? The first might have been effective as propaganda to a captive audience, but most of us have become pretty good at recognizing that. Sprinkle in just a hint of criticism though, and then even the most bloviated journalistic praise sounds fair and balanced, which is a much more effective way at changing people's minds about things that have had some, criticisms. Now enter Johnny Harris. I want to say from the start that I actually really like Johnny Harris. His production quality is off the charts, and his backstory of becoming an independent journalist was part of the reason why I started working with the old team at How Money Works and eventually started this channel. I really considered not making this video. I don't want to turn it into a drama channel, especially one picking fights with a channel 200 times larger than mine, but I thought the issues here were too important to ignore. Saudi Arabia is one of the most journalistically restrictive countries in the world. According to the organization Reporters Without Borders, independent media are non-existent in Saudi Arabia. All official news goes through the country's Ministry of Media and its subdepartment, the General Authority of Media Regulation. Even on their own website, when translated from Arabic, they admit that their objective is to set controls for media content and regulate the status of those working in the media field. Journalists are monitored and regularly imprisoned. Even when they're living abroad in exile, dissenters are not safe. The most high-profile case of this was the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist who was ambushed and killed in a Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. Just a month later, the CIA concluded that the hit was ordered by the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia directly.
The brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi last October in Saudi Arabia's consulate in Turkey has had implications on U.S. policy and the kingdom's reputation.
Harris talks frequently about his credentials as an independent journalist, so the fact that this wasn't mentioned or acknowledged is a bit strange, but it is understandable. According to a Reporters Without Borders paper produced for the UN Human Rights Council, foreign journalists visiting the country are systematically accompanied by official minders who report on the content of their work. Harris is one of the most high-profile journalists in the world, so it's highly unlikely that he would have gotten into the country without the blessing of the government and its agencies. Even if he somehow did take the personal risk to slip in undetected, it would have also been next to impossible for him to film undetected around the building sites of the NEOM project. These developments are a source of national pride for Saudi Arabia, so they're going to carefully curate any footage coming from these sites. A random white dude sticking a camera out of a Land Cruiser in the middle of the Arabian desert isn't exactly low-key. We reached out to Harris's team to get some clarification on their contact, if any, with the Ministry of Media or NEOM representatives while producing their video, but we've yet to receive any reply. Now, Harris and his team run multiple huge YouTube channels, so they're probably receiving hundreds of emails every day. Simply not responding to a list of questions from a relative nobody is not a smoking gun by itself. Anyway, only about 15 minutes of the full 30 video was spent covering these developments, but most of that time was spent gawking at construction equipment, new roads, and big piles of dirt.
Digging alone, the amount of earth that they're moving is jaw-dropping.
Clearly, this man has never been to Birmingham. Anyway, A cynic might say that this kind of reporting directly silences the two biggest criticisms of this project. One, that they would never get done at all, and two, that they're simply a terrible investment. Harris's beautiful visuals show in real time that these things are actually getting done, and interviews throughout the piece also mention projects that are 99% complete. What Harris intentionally or accidentally omits is how scaled down these projects have become from their original headline-catching announcements back in 2021. The line, the centerpiece of the NEOM project, has been cut down from 170 kilometers to just 3 kilometers. This still makes it a massive construction project, but not one that's going to stretch out beyond the horizon like the project's visuals would suggest. Harris is typically the guy that throws down a bunch of papers before delving into immense detail on a niche subject. That's part of why people like him so much. It's hard to imagine that such a major detail in this story was accidentally left out. Now, the last thing the internet needs is another video on NEOM. There are literally hundreds of them at this point, so a possible explanation here is that Harris simply wanted to explore a different aspect of this story, which would be totally fine. Except for the part where he uses this angle to downplay the very serious concerns raised by other journalists and stakeholders.
All of this seems impossible. So much of the reporting on NEOM has been focused on how implausible, expensive, and delusional this project is. And that's all well and good if that's what you want to focus on, but to me that's not that interesting. What I'm most interested in understanding is why.
What's also omitted is the human cost of developing these projects. Saudi Arabia has been widely criticized for its use of poorly paid and mistreated migrant workers to do the actual labor on these construction projects. Again, Harris had to have known about these problems, but didn't mention them in the video. Now, he does briefly mention another social concern with the project, and that is its impact on the local nomadic tribes in the area. If you've watched the video, most of the runtime is spent on an admittedly fascinating look into the lives of these nomadic people. He briefly asks about them being pushed off their land, they briefly talk about how they're being compensated by the government, and the arrests that have been made over people protesting the developments.
I got nervous looks and vague answers. But one thing is for certain. The Saudi government has been paying and compensating anyone who has been affected by these projects. Out of respect, I decide not to push it. It's not worth it.
I want to give Harris the benefit of the doubt here and say that this was just a really strange way of phrasing this in the post-production voiceover. As a journalist, he absolutely has a duty to protect his sources, but he could have inserted other voices on this issue that aren't afraid to speak out about a problem that actually is worth it. Now, remember how just a hint of criticism can make a puff piece sound much more believable? This really is as hard as this video ever hits, which is really off-brand for Harris, who's normally not afraid to talk about some incredibly controversial stuff. So all of this, combined with the fact that the last few minutes of the video sounds like a tourism or investor pitch, probably has you thinking of one logical reason why the video was made this way. It was paid for by the Saudi government to boost the public perception of the project. This was a popular theory from comments on the video, but it's probably not true. Harris has found himself in hot water before being sponsored by the World Economic Forum to report on their talking points, and the NEOM project is not afraid of spending lots of cash on PR, so it could just be a repeat of that. But I think it's more likely that Johnny just wanted to do an on-location shoot to fit in a whole lot of impressive visuals and make a production that was a cut above all the other videos that have been made about NEOM and Saudi Arabia. But to get into the kingdom, he had to play by the rules of the kingdom, which resulted in a visually stunning, yet ultimately compromised video. Now, if this wasn't depressing enough for you, go and watch how the biggest recycling operation in the world is really a humanitarian disaster, creating some of the worst working conditions on the planet, and subscribe to keep getting more micro stories with big consequences.